So, 1001 actually premiered earlier this year at the Sundance Film Festival, and it was shopped around, and ultimately it picked up a deal through Focus Features, and they decided to release it theatrically. This is also notably the first feature film from director A.V. Rockwell. She's directed a number of short films, and I believe commercials as well, commercial work beforehand, but she's done two short films, and now she's coming out with her very first directorial feature film. And this is also Teyana Taylor coming up to really star in her first real leading role, I would say. Like, Teyana Taylor has done so much stuff across the board. She's done stuff with fashion, music, obviously, as many people know her from, but coming in for her first true leading role, coming in as the main character here for 1001. So it had somewhat of a small release and it's going somewhat under the radar, but this is a movie I know we both got a chance to check out in theaters. I wanted to just at least support and see how it performed for us. So with that out the way, I will pass it over to you. What did you think about 1001?
Yeah, beyond Teyana Taylor being the head in the star of this film, I when I realized this was directed by a black woman, it was a no-brainer for me, man. There's again, you can it's very hard to find movies directed by black women, and when one comes up and shows up, I definitely got to get there to see the movie, man, to see to support, and man, 1001, what a movie. This movie is about a young lady who is man, she's on the fringes of life. She is but she's also a very, I think, open and in some ways chaotic person. She kidnaps her son Terry from the foster care system, and pretty much this movie is her what it looks like for getting her and her son back on their feet, what it looks like moving forward after she kidnaps her son, what it looks like her hiding from uh uh the legality of it all, from the authorities, from what it looks like to get him enrolled in school, all of those things. That is what this movie is about, a mother and son in their weird not only relationship but their weird circumstances moving forward, man. And Teyana Taylor, man, what a treasure. She does tremendous work here, man. She is believable all the way through as this character. She feels like somebody I know. Even I was watching this like, dang, like I feel like I know who this is. Who is this? I couldn't put my finger on it. I still can't, but I feel like I knew women like this character, like Inez, in real life, from where I grew up. And that, I think, speaks to the, I think, authenticity of the movie. What something I like about this movie so much is how realistic it is. It is not, this movie is not here to hold your hand and give you butterflies and rainbows and sunshine when it comes to a mother and son story. It really is something that there's so much more to it. There's so much more nuance. There's so much more realism. There's so much that these people in this community have to deal with in order to attempt to be happy, in order to try to get to a place where there's no longer any trauma, or no longer any burdens when it comes to money, or no longer just any overhead when it comes to living life, man, between, again, a mother and a son. And of course there are other players at part. You spoke about William Catlett, and how he serves as somewhat of a father figure in this, but shout out to Josiah Cross too, who plays Terry, who plays the older Terry in this, man. I think he definitely does a tremendous job, because there's a time jump in here. There's like a early and then there's like a later. There definitely is a time jump in this movie. So there's a younger actor and an older actor who plays Terry, the son, in this movie, and they both do a tremendous job. But Josiah Cross, man, I think he takes the reins so well and has to deliver something that is deep and that is heavy in his character of Terry, man. It's a movie that hits close to home. As I was close to an only child. I'm not an only child. Me and my brother are just very far apart in age, but I can just see those things that Inez has to go through as a mother that potentially my mom even had an ounce to go through. as she was raising me, man. So it really it's a good film. It's a realistic film. But it's a dark film, man. It really is. It'll make you think about some things that you didn't think you had to think of before. So I definitely applied A.V. Rockwell. I applied Teyana Taylor, man. But this is a film that if anybody has a chance to go see it, definitely recommend it. It's good. It's a good film.
So it's also important to note that A.V. Rockwell is a native New Yorker, grew up in Queens, and so this is a New York story. This is a New York movie, and the backdrop of the film taking place, sort of behind the actual story between this mother son relationship between Inez and her son. It's also a story about how New York has changed over the course of the past 20 or so years, and so we
Mm-hmm.
find ourselves within 1001, a story that particularly takes place over the course of 11 years, and we're firmly establishing that this is almost a coming of age tale, not only for Inez, who Teyana Taylor plays, but for her son as well. Like we're seeing them both sort of come of age, while also New York City is undergoing drastic changes because it's set initially in the early 90s, and then we progress all the way until about the mid 2000s. And people who have sort of researched history or are from New York know that that's a very pivotal time for the city. It underwent a lot of changes through multiple mayors. There was so much gentrification happening, and you get to see all of that play out over the course of this film, because not only do the character of Inez and her son have to deal with all of their own inner turmoil, their own problems, and the way that they struggle to have a relationship and also hold this secret between them two, but they also have to deal with
Mm-hmm.
the idea and the reality that the city is slowly but surely pushing them out. And so when you combine those elements and the secret that they have to withhold, and also just the fact that at a certain point they're going to have to contend with that, it becomes a very brutal, a brutally honest depiction of just like what that all could turn out to be between these two people who very much love each other, but it's birthed out of a situation that was sort of conceived out of a lie, if we're being honest about the story in and of itself. And so, as you said, it's based off of a kidnapping, really, if we think about it in that way, which you frame it that way, and it's like, oh my God, that sounds terrible. But then you see how the
Mm-hmm.
relationship develops, and it's like, wow, these two people actively care for each other. They're truly there for each other, and we see how that all unfolds over the course of the movie. But I just loved how, all the while watching this, you can see A.V. Rockwell really pushing out all of these personal experiences that she's had within herself and growing up in New York, and just like letting that all spill out onto the screen. Like it is telling these two stories simultaneously, the story of New York City and its evolution, but also the story between a mother and her son, and how those two things impact each other. Because New York City, as two people who live here now, I know, even though I've only been here for about 7 years, like I know it's already undergone tremendous amounts of changes that I never even witnessed because I wasn't here when it was more authentically the New York that people established as it was for so long, for decades, and for history, for such a long time in history. And you can just see how things have changed. You go to 125th Street, which a lot of this movie takes place on, and you can see that there's Whole Foods and restaurants that you can get anywhere. Like that stuff can
Mm-hmm.
exist anywhere. And a lot of that identity that was associated with New York is just kind of removed over the course of time. And that impacts people's, sort of placement within the city. And it specifically targets people of color too. And they have to
Yeah.
deal with those consequences or repercussions on a much more difficult degree than counterparts, from the white community, that have
Mm-hmm.
access to more money and more privilege and more wealth. Like people that are just trying to make it on a day-to-day basis, they're dealing with those repercussions on a very drastic level. And you get to see all of that stuff unfold in very subtle ways. I don't think that they ever hit you over the head with it. I think that they do a very good job at just sort of painting that picture and letting it unfold naturally over the course of the story. So it's a
Good
really
points.
amazing debut from A.V. Rockwell. I certainly cannot wait to see what she does next. I think that she has a very bright future ahead of her. I did listen to an interview with her, and she talked about wanting to tell more stories outside of like the New York context, which is great. But it's also really cool to see like a director be a Black woman come in and say like, yeah, I was influenced by New York directors like Martin Scorsese and Spike Lee, and I want to live in that sort of world, but I also want to expand outside of that and tell new stories as well, because we know Martin Scorsese and Spike Lee can make the best New York movies ever, but they've gone on to do other things as well. And so I can't wait to
Mm-hmm.
see, hopefully A.V. Rockwell have that same type of career in the future. So all great stuff. Definitely would encourage people to check this out if you get the chance to do so. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on 1001. If you've checked out this movie, hit us up and let us know what you think.